folks, it's Kikoskia here, and welcome back to DMing and me. This video contains no gameplay or music whatsoever, allowing you to focus on whatever it is you're up to, whether it's picking your class, going over your attributes, deciding between two skills, or writing a huge backstory for your character. And I'm going to be talking today about some of the characters that I've made and played in various campaigns that I've been a player in. And there have been many. I have been in a lot of campaigns, most of which never finished, but some of them did. And even the ones that didn't finish had some amazing characters in them that I want to talk about today. I'm not going to be going into the nitty-gritty as to what happened in the campaigns themselves, especially considering that some of them are campaigns that you can buy and play yourself. I don't want to spoil the twists of those campaigns, but I am going to talk about very vague things so that you get the idea as to what happened in those campaigns, so that you have context for the experiences that my characters went through. So let's start at the very beginning, shall we? Let's start with that very first campaign that I spoke about last time, and my Paladin. My Paladin was literally the character that I played in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, placed in the campaign that I joined. It was Ayon Kikoskia. That was the name of my very first Baldur's Gate character that actually went through the entire game, and it was literally him in his entirety. He was a typical cookie-cutter paladin, lawful good, strive to help people, compassionate, kind, brave, always willing to stand up for what he believed in and defend those that couldn't defend themselves. And he was in the campaign that I mentioned last time, so he didn't get a lot of opportunity to grow as a character, at least not in the way that I expected. As I mentioned, he was railroaded into falling, so he ended up in a prestige class that I'd never anticipated I'd be going into, mainly because the prestige class was not one I ever knew of. It was one that my DM had created specifically for me to go into. And so he went from a typical paladin to still a typical paladin, just without paladin powers, because all the time he was striving to regain his paladinhood. Unfortunately, just getting an atonement spell was not an option, because we couldn't cast that, and even when I suggested that being cast, the DM just said, oh, it won't work, it's a special case, you're falling from paladinhood, you're going to have to do something else. Eventually I got my paladinhood back, right at the very end of the campaign. I actually was given sort of the option of getting my paladinhood back, because we got some wishes. Now, the rest of the party wished for all kinds of things. One person wished for the ability to be able to attack faster, and so they were given an extra arm. The wizard, the one that ended up becoming the Harlequin, wished to be able to cast more spells, and so was given a second tongue. The player argued that that wasn't even vaguely what he wished for, because getting a second tongue would in no way make spellcasting easier. So he got something different instead. I don't quite remember what. And my paladin, when presented with this wish, ended up wishing for nothing, because he'd seen what had happened to his other friends, and knew that he wasn't likely to be able to make a wish that wouldn't backfire in some manner, so he gave up his wish. We weren't given the option of being able to wish for the safe wishes, so I thought it was better safe than sorry. Abaddon was pretty wise, and quite charismatic. Most importantly for that party, though, he was pretty strong. I believe he used a two-handed sword for the most part. I started off with a long sword and shield, but very quickly it went to a great sword. I think that was because of the whole later on becoming an Avatar of Cain thing, but I've spoken already about the sudden shift in the setting at the end of the campaign. So, Abaddon was very much a typical paladin. Nothing super extraordinary about him. But the next campaign that I was in, the one run by the player who was the ranger, that was an Eberron campaign, and I had never played in an Eberron campaign before. I really like Eberron. I haven't played in enough campaigns that are set in Eberron. And the people that really interested me in Eberron were the Warforged. And so I played a Warforged. An evil Warforged. Lawful evil, to be exact. He didn't have a proper name to begin with. He only got his name a lot later. And my Warforged was a huge, 7 foot tall huge, adamantine-plated, maul-wielding artificer who was pretty strong and very, very sinister. An example of something that will really set the tone as to how that character was that he was walking through one of the lower levels of Shan. Shan, if you don't know, is a humongous city, a massively tall place with towers and multiple floors and multiple levels, and the lower areas can get really dark and dingy. Walking through there, some people that really hated Warforged started berating him. He ignored it. One of them then threw a stone at him. The stone didn't do anything, he was entirely resistant to it due to his damage reduction, and he took that as a sign of aggression, and retaliated, armed with a maul and a tower shield. You can imagine how that went for the people that threw stones. He killed all of them, with the exception of one, that he looked at, glared, and said, "Go and tell the others what you saw." And the guy scrabbled away in petrified terror. And my character left, quite confident that people wouldn't be doing that anymore in that area. You'd think that with his alignment he'd be thinking about betraying the team, but no, he was very loyal to his companions, especially the chaotic good cleric. The cleric was run by a fantastic player, and that cleric was an elf that worshipped the, I don't remember their name, but there was a group of undead elves that formed a council, and he was a cleric of them, and he was amazing at blowing up undead. He was so absurdly powerful. If you think Radiant Servant of Pelor, and think even more powerful than that, undead didn't stand a chance against him, and he and my Warforged were great friends. It wasn't long after that that my Warforged got his name. He had to go to a masquerade ball of all things with the party, and he was there just watching people dance, and he'd been given a mask. They'd all been given a mask. The mask that he got did not fit him, of course, because 7 foot tall Warforged clad in adamantite. That, at this point, I might add, also had a bite attack that was enchanted to be on fire. Yeah, Mask was already starting to look very intimidating, and it was at this point that, as I said for his name, he had an epiphany. "In the end, are we not all wearing masks?" he remarked to one of the characters when they talked about trying to figure out who they needed to talk to, and so Mask got his name. He became known as Mask, and actually got a mask riveted to his face, a demonic visage that made him even more sinister looking. And then he made deals with some very dark powers and gained some really interesting abilities, at a cost that he didn't perceive to be really a thing, because Warforged, but unfortunately we never got to find out what the ramifications were for that, because that campaign did eventually end without finishing, but it was a character I really loved playing, a character who was ruthless and cold and powerful and not afraid to use that power to achieve the party's ends, but also exceptionally loyal to his companions, most of which were his friends. There's a parallel between how Mask reacted and interacted with the party in that campaign and the campaign I'm currently in, which has a lawful evil rogue who is not only a stalwart companion, but a great friend of my chaotic good holy liberator, but I'll be getting to that character later. Another character that I really, really like is one that I'm sure many of you already know about, and that is Barry Coleman. There's a bit of a story attached to Barry Coleman. It had been quite a while since I had last played D&D, and it was a long hiatus of sorts. Not a intended one, and not something I liked, but it was what it was. And one day I got a message from my friend who I hadn't spoken to for quite a while, and he had a D&D campaign, which they'd only just started, and he wanted to invite me along. And I jumped at the opportunity because I hadn't spoken to him for quite a while, I hadn't played D&D for quite a while. I was overjoyed at the opportunity and accepted immediately. I was told to create a third level character. Ideally, I was told a healer, because they lacked a healer. And I thought about it for a while, and Barry just stuck in my head. Barry was a 30-something-year-old man with a beard and receding hair, and he was going to be a cleric of Cord with a greatsword. I mentioned before that I had to take a feat to use that greatsword, and I presented this character to my friend, the DM, and he was happy with it, though he was very curious as to why I called him Barry. And I simply responded with, "Well, aren't there people in that world called Barry?" And he went, "Yeah, but they typically don't become adventurers." And I said, "Sure they do, you just don't hear about them. For every Azathiel and Alaya Quickslash, there is a Barry, and a John, and an Aisha. People with ordinary names who decide to become adventurers, and that's what Barry was. A man with an ordinary name, Barry Coleman, who served a higher purpose, a deity Cord. And was he an amazing character. He was very much, I'm going to sit down in this tavern and have a drink and regale you with stories, and, oh, there's an arm wrestling competition there, better compete in that, or even just a wrestling contest in the Temple of Cord. Gonna go and enter that, and I'll be back later." Very much was a friendly, compassionate man who did what he could to help others. Chaotic good, so he did what he could to help others, regardless of the legal implications sometimes. That did land us in trouble more than once. But he had the might to back it up. He had the god to back it up, because Cord, being the god of strength, lended him a lot of power. So much so that he ended up earning a lot of attention from his patron as he gained more levels and got further in the campaign. For those curious, it was the Age of Worms campaign. Barry never died through the entire campaign. Probably because I was the healer, and thus I was able to heal myself when I needed to. The healer making sure that they survive is very important, because they can't heal anyone else if they're dead. And I was doing a lot of healing as well as a lot of fighting, because we had some members of the party, namely one person called Roger, who, by the time we got to near epic level, would die every single encounter. Every single encounter he would get killed or eaten by something, and then I'd have to rush to revivify him. I had Revivify prepared all the time, and for those that don't know, it is a spell that brings somebody back from the dead with 1 hit point, but doesn't cost them a level so long as you can cast it on them within a round of their death. So Roger would die, and then Barry would be like, "I've got to get to Roger and revive him right now." And then we'd hope that Roger wouldn't get killed again after we revived him. There was usually somebody else that would use a wand or something to heal him. We did find a lot of really, really nasty things in that campaign, but I'm not going to go into detail as to what those things are. Again, don't want to spoil it for anyone else. But Barry was huge fun to play. And Barry is a character that we still talk about fondly now, because Barry is still about in the campaign that we're currently playing. It's set in the same world, set a little bit after the events of the previous campaign, and so Barry has been mentioned a couple of times, and we do actually have an updated character sheet for Barry, just in case I ever had to play him again, because if my current character dies, that could very well be a possibility, but I digress. I want to talk about another Eberron character, because we've only really played 2 long-term Eberron campaigns. The first one had Mask, And the second one, I played Mia. Mia was a changeling. Now, for those who don't know, changelings are kind of like doppelgangers, only not. They have the ability to use the disguise self spell rather than the more powerful doppelganger power. They can change their appearance to match any humanoid species. But Mia had one appearance that she stuck with, because I read a lot about the changelings before I went into that campaign, and I read about some changelings who have a form that they perceive as them, like that is who they are, and they stick to that form and they don't change it. So what I did was I went to my DM privately and said, I'm going to be a changeling, rogue, but I'm not going to reveal to the party that I'm a changeling. For all the party know, I'm going to be a human rogue. And my DM was very curious about this and wanted to know the reasoning, and I explained about the idea that some changelings have a form that they believe is theirs. There was also the fact that there was a group of people that she used to work with that she doesn't like anymore. They ended their partnership on very unfavourable terms, and Mia had kept her preferred form secret from them, and so she stayed in that form not only because it was who she was, but because it also protected her from them. And so, from first level all the way to about 8th or 9th level, the party were none the wiser about Mia being a changeling. They just thought she was a human that had a ridiculous amount of bluff, because Mia was ridiculously good at bluffing. She was not a combat rogue. She was very much a deceitful rogue, a rogue that snuck about, a rogue that opened up locks and disabled traps, spotted things, and was great at talking to people. She had really good diplomacy, she had really good intimidate, she was brilliant at bluffing, and pretty good at sensing when people were lying as well. Her weapon of choice was a dagger, and she did have a feat that gave her some very minor spellcasting, and this kind of backfired, because the campaign led us to the Mournlands. For those that don't know what the Mournlands are, they are a place that magic is weird in. Most healing doesn't work properly, and the place is full of undead, constructs, oozes, and living spells. Now, something ties all of those things together, and that is that none of them can be sneak attacked. At all. And so, what would typically happen in the Mournlands, and in quite a few encounters where there was a massive monster, is that Mia would see this massive monster. She'd look at her dagger. She'd look up at the giant monster and just go, and then fire off her few feat-given magic missile spells, and then she'd be out of oomph, because that was not an encounter I would be very helpful in. That said, I was able to use wands and the like to heal people and that kind of thing, but wasn't able to take advantage of that sneak attack. It was something that I was talking to my DM recently, something that my DM lamented, that the Mournlands was a huge section that I couldn't do very much in, but I still really had a lot of fun. Eventually they did discover that I was a changeling. It was going to happen, and my character was very worried about how they'd react to that, because I'd effectively been lying to them the entire time I was there, but they didn't care. And this was a wonderful moment for Mia, because Mia knew then that they were truly her friends, and they even helped her when the group that she used to work with caught up with her, and we had to deal with them. And my, did we deal with them. They were not a problem by the time we were done. We ended that problem. Unfortunately, the campaign, much like the one where I played as Mask, that one didn't get to its end either, but it was still great fun to play, and playing a character who wasn't really combat capable was quite interesting. She was very much a confident and snarky character, and she was also somebody that had a lot of secrets to hide, and she only told people what she needed to tell people, including her party at times, though once they knew that she was a changeling, that changed substantially, and she was a lot more open about these things, albeit she still didn't tell other people that she was a changeling. She still kept that a secret. She rarely transformed, even after they discovered that thing about her. It was a major feature of being a changeling, being able to use disguise self at will, and I didn't use it until I was about 9th level. I put myself under a mechanical disadvantage willingly for the sake of a character, and what a character she was. And then there's the character I'm currently playing as, Kiran. Not the first character in this campaign that I'm in. I'm playing in the sequel campaign for the Age of Worms, the Savage Tide it's called. And originally I played as a half-orc fighter called Sarken. People who watched the Neverwinter Nights LP, you'll know who Sarken is, sort of. Sarken in the tabletop campaign was a little bit different. He was a guard, he had a loyal guard dog that was also his pet, and he was really good at using a spear and heavy armour, and I was planning to build him up as a Beastmaster. Didn't happen, unfortunately, because he got killed by a red cap in a cave. And I had to come up with a new character. He was a character I put a fair amount of backstory idea into. Human mother, orc father, loving relationship between them. Orc father, unfortunately, died on a journey heading somewhere for his work. Mother was left to take care of Sarken alone. When Sarken died, I had to come up with someone else, and Kiran came to mind. Kiran is a rough-and-tumble light weapon fighter. He started off with levels of rogue and fighter, and right from the beginning I decided not to use the rogue skills to gain any of the typical roguish abilities. He has no ranks in hide and move silently, even now when he's at level 20. He has no ranks in open lock or disable device. He does, however, have lots and lots of ranks in bluff, so that he can feint people. He has lots of ranks in climb, and swim, and jump, and tumble, because he very much is an acrobatic combatant. He's a two-weapon fighting warrior who uses his strength and dexterity to get to where he needs to be and strike the hardest. And mind you, he and the rogue work together beautifully, because the rogue has gone just rogue for 20 levels, and sneak attacks very hard, and my character sneak attacks very hard now, because over time he became a street fighter. This is 3.5, by the way. I didn't mention it until this point, but I presume that since I talk about 3.5 a lot, that people would just think it was 3.5. And Street Fighter eventually went to a different class. Now, Kiran is a character who knows ancient Siloi, so he's from the lands that were formerly part of the Sul Empire. And that language has been used precisely once in the campaign, apart from Kiran swearing in ancient Siloi sometimes. Nice little bit of flavourful character stuff that never really had an impact, but was very distinctly him. He had just disembarked from a boat that brought him here on the hunt for the pirate that kidnapped his wife. They got married, and not long afterwards, pirates attacked the town and kidnapped her. And he went after them. He decided that he would not rest until he found out what happened. And he ended up becoming a pirate hunter, effectively. That's why he was very acrobatic. He had to be able to deal with ship combat, which requires lots of climbing, jumping, sometimes swimming. And they took him on, and eventually the paths of the party and those pirates crossed, and Kiran was at risk of going down a bad path. He worships Tritherion, the deity of vengeance, retribution, individualism, freedom, and that's led to some butting of heads between various party members as he decides on certain things that mainly the Bard disagreed with. Both the same alignment, very different outlooks on things. But they've always ended up coming to an agreement, and it was the Bard that was essential in preventing Kiran from going down a darker path and slipping from chaotic good, because vengeance was in danger of taking over, of taking hold completely, and Father William the Bard was able to talk him down and get him to see that there was more to this than vengeance, and that he should not let it cloud his judgment. And without that talk, Kiran would not be the holy liberator that he is now, because he's dedicated himself in a way to fighting evil that I never thought would happen when I started with that character. I thought that I'd just go back to fighter and rogue, or maybe take something prestige class related to martial prowess, and then holy powers. It just sort of fitted perfectly with Kiran. His voice is very much like this. The joke came that he was like Jason Statham, except he had hair. I can see where that came from. And very much he jokes a bit, and he has a weak pint when they go into the tavern, because he likes to always be ready. He's very, very determined, though. Very determined to fight for the freedoms of others, and he absolutely hates slavery. If he gets wind of slavery anywhere, oh my, is he going to deal with it. And considering that he's now level 20, he will be able to deal with it. Kiran has done some wondrously amazing things in this campaign, including what just happened recently, where we took a challenge rating 20 creature out in one round. Because we got the jump on the creature, and I dealt nearly 200 points of damage to it. Because 2-weapon fighting going all the way down the tree for those feats means you get 7 attacks around, and when every single one of them can sneak attack because you're flanking, that adds up really quickly. Really, really quickly. And I've just realised that I didn't add the 2d6 points of damage for Bane, did I? I did not add that. I should have added that. I would have hit it even harder. Ah, well. Such things. Such things. It's just wonderful thinking about all the close calls that Kiran has had, and the conversations about his faith, and actually finding his wife. They actually did locate his wife. Not in the hands of the pirates, but in the hands of somebody else that was not a nice person. And the rogue dealt with him. I never found out what happened between the rogue and that person, but that guy is gone now. And with that, I've spoken in brief about some of my more memorable characters. I have, as I've said, played all kinds of characters in my time. I've played a human ranger whose favourite enemy was other humans. I've played a gnome paladin. I've played a lizardman fighter who wore plate mail, had a tower shield, and just stood there as a nigh-on unstoppable obstacle that always got defeated by touch spells. I've played all kinds of things, and more than a few attempts at playing a spell sword. The less said about spell sword, the better. There was a time when I was really, really fascinated by that prestige class and really wanted to make it work. I even found a way to have a spell sword be able to not only use arcane spells, but also some divine spells, and thus be able to heal himself. Some would argue that I should have just made a bard, somebody that could fight and cast arcane and divine spells, but I wanted to make a spell sword. Look up the spell sword 3.5 and you'll see why I'm so intrigued by it. There was a wonderful picture to represent the spell sword. I'm pretty sure the stat block for the spell sword that they gave you the example for wasn't actually legal. Admittedly, that's not as bad as the Staff of Glory from the Arms and Equipment Guide, or the Prestige class in the Complete Adventurer, which was the D&D equivalent of Batman, that had the wrong number of 4th level spells, so that you didn't get 0 4th level spells at one point, you got 10. There was definitely a delete that needed to be pressed there that wasn't. What I'd love to hear about is some of the characters that you've played as, so feel free to post about them in the comments. I'd love to read what you've played as. And so, when we come back, folks, more DMing and me, or writing and me, or stuff about the Threndy of Dusseldom, or any number of topics. As a note, Chapter 10 of the Threnody of Dusseldom is now available. If you want to go to kikoskia.com/writing/Dusseldom, spelled DOSTLEDOM, or follow a link in the description, you'll find it there. And I hope you enjoy what I've written. And so, when we come back, folks, more talking about DMing, or writing, or who knows what. It's a mystery! And so, I'll catch you next time, folks, and I'll see you then. Later.